Hey everybody, welcome once again to the Football Fandemic, where we are going to be looking at some of the big news around the league, previewing the playoff action from last week, and previewing, I guess, is actually what we're going to be doing for the Divisional Round. We'll review last week here on the Football Fandemic. That calls for an after introduction sip, right?
There you go. There you go.
We're going to preview the divisional round coming up. We're going to review the wild card weekend stuff. But before we do any of that, we're going to do as we always do and get to some of our news and happenings around the NFL. And Josh, I'm going to let you take the lead on this. Start us off on what's going on. Mostly this is going to be coaching stuff, I think. Yeah.
Yep. And we've had a couple of big coaching news things since our last podcast. One of which is Mike McCarthy and the Dallas Cowboys parting ways mutually.
Yes.
I guess there was like contract negotiations between them. Mike McCarthy, like they were interested in bringing McCarthy back. McCarthy was interested in coming back. But from the reports that I've seen just on like Twitter and ESPN and all of that, it seems like McCarthy wanted a more stable and longer term deal than the Cowboys were willing to give him. So he ended up walking away, and we'll probably try to find a job in the coaching cycle. So that's a new vacancy that was created. Yeah. And then a vacancy became closed when the Patriots hired Mike Vrabel.
Look at that. And you know what? When he was fired from Tennessee, I was not a fan of that. And I know they got a guy they wanted in there, and that's good. But, man, it didn't seem like he was doing that poorly with what they were giving him. And so I hope to see him do well. And this is a really hard thing for me to say, if you'll notice the little issue on my front of my shirt here. To say I want him to do well with the New England Patriots, it just seems all bad. I mean, Mike Vrabel, New England Patriots, the whole thing, something I've rooted against many, many, many times. But I do hope he does well there, just not well enough to, cause trouble for the Colts in the AFC. But maybe to cause trouble for the Bills, maybe.
And it would be fun. They have the quarterback to do that. And you're talking, like Mike Vrabel got to an AFC championship game and had a halftime lead against the Kansas City Chiefs in an AFC championship game.
Tannehill,
yeah. And in a different year, got the Titans the number 1 seed with Ryan Tannehill. Yeah. And I mean, a lot of that, Arthur Smith was his offensive coordinator during that, that AFC championship run. And Mike Vrabel is kind of like he's not one of those coaches that is like coming in and going to take over one side of the ball. Like a lot of these coaches, like Shane Steichen in Indianapolis, he's going to be like offensive guy. Kevin O'Connell, same deal with Minnesota. Mm-hmm. Mike Vrabel's kind of like an overseer that can hire different good coordinators, and now he'll have the best quarterback that he's had to work with in Drake May. He had a promising rookie year. They have a lot of cap space. They also have a lot that they kind of need to like sift through and get rid of. There's a lot of garbage there that they need to go through and replace. So it's going to be a tough task, but like Mike Vrabel was able to do it with the Titans, and I think he's going to be able to do it with the Patriots if they give him enough time. They didn't give Gerard Mayo more than a year after the Belichick area. So maybe they give Vrabel a bit longer of a leash.
Not going to lie. Last year, Vrabel was available. I really thought the New England Patriots, I thought it was a slam dunk. He was like a Pro Bowler for them in their Ring of Honor, right? And he had proved to be a decent coach. I thought for sure he would be there, and then he wasn't. It was kind of surprising. So a year later, and it seems like, if all reports are to be believed, he's going to have all the control he wants. The dude who is kind of the GM, the assistant GM, whatever, is he reports to Vrabel, not the other way around. And I think Vrabel's going to have full control over this roster. So we'll get to see what he can. That's the way Belichick had it, I think, pretty much. Yeah. They had a dude there, but everybody knew who was pulling those strings and who was saying, this is who I want, this is who I want, this is how it's going to go. And so it'll be interesting to see Vrabel there. And going back to Dallas, man, I know I really hate the moniker America's team, but every coach looks at Dallas. That's a huge market in a state with no, income tax, in a place that is known for football. People are football fanatics, and that becomes a cherry right there. That becomes like probably one of the top spots that coaches are looking to maybe go to. Now, as far as their roster and their cap space and all that, I don't know what their cap space is. It doesn't feel like it's great, just
No,
off
they
the
have
top of my
like
head.
they have both CD Lamb and Dak Prescott signed a long-term deal, so I feel like and expensive
Yeah.
long-term deals too. So I feel like there's not a whole lot of work to work with, but they do have like when Micah Parsons was healthy this last year, their defense what did have like a strong showing, but he
Mm-hmm.
missed like 6 weeks out of the season. They were also using Mike Zimmer's sort of more antiquated defensive scheme a lot, which caused some headaches. But back half of the season, their defense was really good, and then you also have like a potential franchise quarterback with Dak Prescott long term. So there's a lot of pieces that I feel like are already there. If the Cowboys can prove that last year was just more of a step back and not something that's going to continue to trend downwards.
And it's hard with someone like Micah Parsons. They're really good, but if they're hurt all the time, I think we saw that with Darius Leonard or
Hmm.
Shaq Leonard, whatever he came to be called at the end there. And he was like really good, like when he started. But the more he got injured, just like the more he was out for injury, and we couldn't count on him. And when he came back, he was not 100%. So that is something to watch for them. And they do have those long term contracts, but someone will have the desire to go in there and try, and they could make it work, maybe. Okay, so we got Dallas, we got New England. Who else? What else?
So yeah, our openings right now are the Cowboys, the Bears, the
Ooh,
Jets, the Jaguars, and the Las Vegas Raiders. And real quick for the Cowboys, one of the guys that they were interested in interviewing is Deion Sanders, the Colorado Buffaloes head coach, and obviously
really?
uh,
Yeah.
former NFL Hall of Famer, former Cowboys cornerback, also played in Major League Baseball as well. So like a
And
guy that
he
has a lot
has
of
he has the ear of like one of the number one, one of the highest draft picks. As far as like, you don't go there, you do go there, and so
yeah. I mean,
what's his name?
two of the
Yeah.
highest draft picks with both his son Shador Sanders and then Travis Hunter, who is kind of like a Deion Sanders who played both offense and defense at times during his NFL career. Hunter's
Hmm.
kind of like that guy. He did that in college and won the Heisman. So it would be interesting for that. I don't know if I mean the Cowboys wouldn't be picking high enough to potentially get Shador Sanders. And I know Dion in the past has said that the one way that he would coach in the NFL is if he got to coach with his son. I mean, maybe that's just kind of trying to like make the bids for him come in a little bit higher.
Mm.
But it would be an interesting hire. I don't know any other candidates that the Cowboys have interviewed just yet. But Sanders has been like, oh, Jason Witten was another guy that they were potentially interested. Their former tight end. But yeah, and Kellen Moore is like kind of like the logical potential fit, former offensive coordinator there, and is having a good run with the Eagles, and it takes away a really good coordinator from your division rival.
Hmm.
But those I think are the three guys. None of them have been interviewed, but the three that reports have stated that Jerry Jones is interested in so far. And then moving on to the Chicago Bears, they are interested in everybody and anybody. They are casting the widest net in a head coaching search that I have ever seen. I'm just going to give you some of the names of the
Okay.
people that they've already interviewed because they've interviewed, I think, 9 or 10 so far, and they still have guys that they're trying to interview. So they've interviewed Thomas Brown, who was their interim head coach and interim offensive
Hmm.
coordinator, the guy that started as like a lower assistant, moved all the way up. Pete Carroll, they've interviewed, the former
Yes.
Seahawks head coach. Aaron Glenn, Detroit's defensive coordinator, and then Detroit's offensive coordinator as well. Ben Johnson,
Of
the
course.
Giants offensive, yeah, the Giants offensive coordinator, Mike Kafka. They
Don't
were
know
able
why
to get
that one.
now. Yeah, I'm not sure
Their
why.
offense didn't seem particularly explosive last year.
Except for that Drew Lock game. Maybe
The game against the Colts, is that the one you're
yeah.
talking about?
Yeah.
Stop it.
Mike McCarthy is one of the guys potentially they've interviewed him. Drew
I
Petzing.
would just say, as a any fan, as a Bears fan, but as a Colts fan, any team fan, I hate when you get somebody who seems like they've been there, they've been high, and then they just kind of been at other places and they're not that great. I would not want that. I want somebody new and fresh. But
Yeah, yeah,
anyway, Mike
I
McCarthy.
I would too. But if I'm a not fan of the Bears, I would love for
You
Mike
would love
McCarthy.
that, huh? So Brandon would be all for it. Although
Yeah,
that was no, that's Mike McCarthy. They have Mike McCarthy way. I don't think he wants them with the Bears.
yeah, that's true. It would kind of be a stab in the back.
Yeah.
But the Packers fans have been used to that with like Brett Favre going to the Vikings, and if history tells us anything, Aaron Rodgers going to go to the Vikings. Uh, they've also interviewed Arizona Cardinals offensive coordinator Drew Petzing.
Okay.
They've interviewed former Commanders and Panthers head coach Ron Rivera.
Mistake.
David Shaw, the former Stanford head coach, and he's currently in the Broncos front office.
Right.
And then Anthony Weaver, the Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator. So those are the guys they've interviewed so far. And there are 7 other guys that they have formally requested interviews with, that they're probably going to interview before they make their head coaching decision. Iowa State head coach Matt Campbell, Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator Joe Brady, Vikings defensive coordinator Brian Flores, Commanders offensive coordinator and former Cardinals head coach Cliff Kingsbury, the Ravens offensive coordinator and back-to-back national championship with Georgia as an offensive coordinator Todd Monken, and then also the Packers offensive coordinator Adam Stenovich, and the Steelers offensive coordinator and former Titans head coach Arthur Smith. So
you weren't kidding.
I need to take a breath.
Net. That is a lot. That is a lot. So here's the question. You look at the Bears team. How do you feel that is set up as far as coaches looking at that and thinking, I could do something with that?
Well, I mean, I think they have the quarterback to potentially do it with. I mean, it's a guy that was the number 1 pick a year ago and didn't live fully up to his potential. But there's a reason that he was the number 1 pick, because pretty much every team thought that he had the highest potential out of any of the quarterbacks in what has turned out to be a pretty generational quarterback class. Like everybody so far that's played has played pretty well.
Yeah. Who all do we have? We have Drake May, Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, and Caleb Williams. Who else?
Michael Penix ended the season, and then JJ McCarthy was injured for Minnesota. Right. So like it's been a good class, and Caleb Williams was the head of that class, like on a consensus basis. I'm sure if any of the teams that drafted quarterbacks had the number 1 pick, they would have gone with Caleb Williams.
I think there were some teams that probably thought Jaden Daniels. It was probably a toss-up between those two. I think Jaden Daniels was rated pretty highly.
He was, yeah. So I mean, maybe Washington and maybe like I think New England was also interested in Jaden Daniels too, if he had dropped past Washington. But like that's a place to start. And I think the reason why the Bears, are casting such a wide net is they took something that Kevin O'Connell said to heart earlier in the season, and that was that quarterbacks don't fail franchises, but franchises fail franchise quarterbacks. And they want to make sure they get the right guy in place and gather all of the information that they can during these head coach interviews. Because I mean, when you're interviewing these guys, you're also asking about their offensive scheme and what scheme that they would do to make Caleb the most successful. And you can write that down and keep that in the back of your mind. And whoever your head coach is and offensive coordinator kind of like give them those extra ideas so they can kind of combine all of that and sort of make an offense that's multifaceted and isn't just the brainchild of one offensive coordinator. I mean, and you also want a guy that's a good leader and that can get Caleb Williams in the right mindset week in, week out to reach that full potential.
That guy who can be the quarterback whisperer, but can also put the right scheme in place to make things easy for him and to work to his strengths. You're right that often it is a franchise that lets down the quarterback and not the other way around, especially with these young talents that have talent, but they need to be molded some. And I think Jaden Daniels fell into a really good situation with Dan Quinn and with that whole staff that they put together, which was crazy because before Dan Quinn and before that staff it was put together, it was kind of a mess there in the front office with Washington, just with the ownership. Even Ron Rivera, I felt like was a very kind of laid back. I don't know. I wasn't in the locker room, but he seemed like a laid back, soft kind of coach, players coach. And I'm not saying Dan Quinn is like hard on everybody, but I think setting the culture and getting the scheme set up for Jaden Daniels and like really working with him has shown to prove how good it can help a quarterback. Caleb Williams maybe didn't have that. I don't know. I don't think their offensive system was ever correctly in place for him. It didn't seem like. So we'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see who they get. Now, do you think this is a place that obviously they have receivers, they have running backs, they have a quarterback, they have a defense.
Yeah.
You know, do you think this is a place that could draw like one of those coordinators from the Lions?
I think it could, and I think Ben Johnson would be a great fit. I mean, he was able to resurrect Jared Goff's career. The first year Jared Goff was in Detroit, their offensive coordinator was Anthony Lynn, and Jared Goff did not look good. Ben
Right.
Johnson comes in the year later, and it was a night and day difference. And like he's scheming guys open for Jared Goff, who has that ability to just find the open receiver. And now, if you can scheme guys open for Caleb Williams as well as you did in Detroit, it's going to make his job a lot easier and allow him to develop without taking as many bumps and bruises on the way up the ladder.
It's weird. Jared Goff was a number 1 overall pick too, and he was in with Rams, and he just wasn't doing it. And when he was traded, it was kind of almost like, okay, we're getting rid of him. He's going to become that journeyman. You know, it was crazy. Like you said, the night and day difference once Ben Johnson got in there, and now you look at Jared Goff, and he's not like one of these quarterbacks that scream for attention all the time, but he's good. You watch him; he throws fast, he throws on target. He knows he knows where he's supposed to be going, what he's looking for. So it'd be nice for the Bears fans to have some sort of success like that. And I
Yeah.
know it didn't happen with Detroit, and it is now. So it can happen, Bears fans. Hold hope. It can happen for you again. I know. Well, I don't know if again is the right word. I don't know if you've ever had like a great quarterback, but it can happen for you.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see. And then Cliff Kingsbury was also Caleb Williams' offensive coordinator in college too, and has kind of helped mold Jaden, like used all of the strengths of Jaden Daniels to make him to maximize everything that he has been able to do. And it's been like a fantastic season for Jaden Daniels. Obviously, he's going to be the offensive rookie of the year, probably unanimously.
Yeah.
The other 4 vacancies, like I don't think they're as desirable. Maybe the Jaguars. I know that, speaking of Ben Johnson, he's been linked to both the Jaguars and the Raiders. The problem with the Jaguars job is that nobody likes Trent Baalke ever since like I mean, he's the guy that he's the reason that the 49ers probably didn't have like a dynasty in the 2010s, because he ousted Jim Harbaugh, who had winning records and was the winningest head coach by winning percentage in his 4 years there. And now he's been doing a bad job in Jacksonville too. Like, he's the guy that hired Urban Meyer. And there's been 2 things in my like NFL fandom that I have been like certain of in my prognostication. And that was that Urban Meyer would fail in Jacksonville, and then that the Daniel Jones contract would also be a massive failure too. Both of those things came to fruition. And I think everybody in the NFL knew that Urban Meyer was not going to be like the guy that you put Trevor Lawrence around. Baalke's the one that made that decision.
Here's the thing. I don't think any of us thought it would be as bad as it was. At least, I thought it would be bad, but I didn't think it'd be as just ridiculously bad as it was for Urban Meyer.
With the hitting of kicking the kicker and like not going back with the team, the nightclub. Yeah, it was so
back with the team. Yeah,
it was so weird. But Baalke's the guy that did that.
Here's the question: is Baalke staying? His job is secure.
Shad Khan said in the same conference call where he fired Doug Peterson, he said that Trent Baalke is definitely staying with us. So I don't know. Maybe like if Ben Johnson, who is probably one of the best head coaching candidates we've had in a long time, says, you know what, I don't want to work for Balky, maybe they get rid of him. Maybe they let Ben Johnson wield some of that power, or maybe they just put him into like a title only job in the front office and bring in whoever Ben Johnson wants. But I think that's going to scare away a lot of like top head coaching candidates. Jim Harbaugh was exiled from the NFL because of basically the smear campaign that Trent Baalke put on him, and had to win a national championship in order to be a viable coaching candidate. Saints, no idea what's going to happen there.
It's crazy how the Saints used to be a powerhouse. And like for the last several years, I feel I could say the same about the Colts, but like for the last several years, I'm just like, I don't know what to think about them. I don't know that I feel any particularly optimism for them or any like particular pessimism. I just feel like they're kind of that middle floating little group there in the the NFC South.
Yeah, ever since Drew Brees and Sean Payton left, I mean, they have Derek Carr still, but he's been injured a lot the last 2 years. And he's not like an elite quarterback. He's like a serviceable quarterback. I think Aaron Glenn is the guy that has been linked there the most. He used to play for the Saints. He's also a guy that's been linked to the Jets the most because he also used to play for the New York Jets for the majority of his career. So, like, I think he's the leading candidate in the clubhouse for both of those jobs. And then the Raiders, apparently Tom Brady is calling a lot of the shots here. They're a minority owner. He owns 5% of the team, but I think Mark Davis. Yeah.
They trust his football knowledge that much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've seen Michael Jordan own an NBA team, and that didn't go very well. So we'll see if it's going to translate well now at the NFL level. But if he's going to have the sort of power that I think Mark Davis is going to let him have, the reports are that he has been very, very interested in Ben Johnson, and that some of that interest is being reciprocated by Ben Johnson, even though the Raiders are probably the least desirable of these vacancies to go to. I mean, there's an offensive line and there's a defensive line there, but so that's like, you don't have to work to build the grittiness of the football culture maybe there. But Aiden O'Connell is your starting quarterback. Your starting running back at the end of the season was Amir Abdullah. There's not, I mean, you have Brock Bowers, you have a good tight end, but I don't know if there is going to be like a lot in the cupboard for whoever comes there, but apparently Ben Johnson is interested in that. And maybe the thought process behind that is like, he just wants to be able to like build a good roster and see how far his potential can go. But that's a dangerous path, because if you start having, especially with the Raiders, 1-2 bad seasons, a lot of time those guys are out after a year and a half. They just continue to fire head coaches left and right. Maybe that's different with Tom Brady at the helm. But Mark Davis still has the financial power and can decide to take control at any moment back from Tom Brady in terms of the decision making.
Yeah, that you're right in that there's not a whole lot that just seems like screaming potential for that team. But if he went there and could do it, I feel like he would have to get a different quarterback somehow.
Yeah.
I don't know where he would go, how he would do that. I don't know what their cap situation is. Probably just middling. But the excitement of the wondering, and we won't be able to know any of this until the Lions are done. And well, we'll get to our preview of this coming week here soon to let you know if we think that could be soon or later. But yeah. We got all these coaching vacancies, and the fun is when all of that starts swirling and it's not your team. Now, unfortunately, sometimes people are left wondering, is my guy good enough to do it? I love Shane Steichen. I'm sorry, I'm going total Colts here. I love Shane Steichen. I've always have, but like even I know it's only his second year, but I've begun to question, does he have what it takes to keep the locker room like engaged and competitive? Or it seems like our locker room has not been the most detail-oriented, the most ready, the most, so I don't know if it's him or if it's something else or someone else. I'm hoping that I'm wrong and that he comes gloriously out of the fog here this next year.
Yeah. Yeah. One more piece of news that I did want to hit on, it's kind of minor, but it's kind of funny also, is that the Ravens claimed Deontay Johnson after he was waived by the Houston Texans. So they put him on waivers, the Texans did, after the first playoff game, assumingly because, he wants to go to his fifth team, I think, or fourth team this season. And all waiver claims don't go through until after the Super Bowl. So the Ravens purposefully put in a waiver claim to stop Deontay Johnson from getting to free agency, where he could freely sign right now, today,
with someone else,
with a playoff team, because of how badly they kind of how bad he was when he was there in terms of like his attitude and everything. So they are putting the waiver claim on him, so he cannot go to play anywhere else throughout the rest of the season. I just think
spite.
Just out of spite. That's what it seems like, at least if you're like reading between the tea leaves. But it just is. It's like he can't play for the Ravens. Even he can't suit up. And now they'll be the team that gets the comp pick for him if he goes into free, or what if he signs with a new team in free agency this year. So it's
That's crazy. That's crazy.
The nature of revenge in the NFL, I guess. That's one way to do it.
Well, there you go, everybody. That's our coaching openings and what we're looking forward to following here for some of the off season as you head to the draft. You're always watching these coaching things, because coaching and GM stuff, yeah, either they'll get it done right away so those people can begin to plan for the draft, or they'll wait till after the draft and fire their people and put in new people, which however you think that works best, we'll see.
Yeah.
But we are going to go back and look at some games that just happened this last weekend in the wild card round of the playoffs. Josh, just take us through each one of these games. Let's just comment on what we thought about the game itself and the way it turned out and what we see going forward for that team.
Yeah, we'll just go from like the order they were played in. And the first one was the Houston Texans beating the Los Angeles Chargers 32-12. Chargers first couple of drives looked really, really strong. Like Herbert was completing passes, but they would stall out in the red zone, and they had like a 6-0 lead throughout most of the first half before Houston kind of really started to turn it on a little bit on offense. And CJ Stroud, he's had a down year, I think, and has been below expectations from what he was able to show last season. And he still didn't have a great game, but he did make some great plays. I'm not sure if you were able to see, there was this one where there was a botched snap. It went over his head. He goes back, picks it up, and then is able to make a throw on the run under pressure over the middle of the field. And this was on third down in a one-possession game at the time, and it's like a 30-yard completion over the middle. Wow. So he did make some plays. He still had some of the same problems that have kind of been on his back so far this season, and that he struggles a lot under pressure, especially when that pressure comes up in the interior, and that he can kind of get locked in on his first read guy like Nico Collins. But he was able to make plays when it mattered. And also the Texans probably had their best rushing performance of the season. So that came through in a big spot for them. Joe Mixon had a big game. They were rarely getting stuffed at the line of scrimmage. They were getting a lot of like successful chunk runs. And I think they had like 4 or 5 runs that were 10, 15 yards plus. So they were able to kind of keep the offense on the field. On the other side, they just completely were able to get into Justin Herbert's head. He was the second most pressured quarterback of this past weekend. We'll get into the other one perhaps later. And that's Sam Darnold. But he had pressures in his face. These were quick pressures. These were pressures that got to him under 2.5 seconds. He was pressured on 18 of his dropbacks, about 40%. And on those dropbacks, 12 of those 18 pressures were within 2.5 seconds. So by the time you're hitting your third step in your drop, and there's not a whole lot you can do with that. And the big reason was Will Anderson had 6 of those quick pressures. And to put that into perspective,
number 1 or number 3 overall.
Yeah, right after CJ Stroud. Like,
right.
how hard to have better draft than that. But and then Daniil Hunter also great, and then D'Amico Autry, who I had not really heard much of,
Used to be a
had a
Colt.
huge game. Yeah, he had five. He had as many pressures as Daniil Hunter did in that game, and so they were all over Justin Herbert and forced him to throw the ball early and inaccurately. He threw 4 interceptions in this game, and he had 3 interceptions throughout the regular season. So he threw more interceptions here than he did all season long. It was their defense really stepped up in a big way and won that battle that we talked about last week between those defensive ends and then Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt. It was a heavily favored win for that Texas or the Houston defensive line.
Yeah, this was the one game I didn't get to watch. This was the Thursday night game. Was there? Well, no, it was a Saturday.
It's the Saturday, yeah, for the Saturday
For some
afternoon.
reason, I didn't get to watch this one, and I fully expected the Chargers to beat Houston. You know, C.J. Stroud had a more down year. I thought the Chargers were on the rise. I thought the Houston Texans weren't going to have enough. And when I look back at the score, I don't, you know, you said for the whole first half it was like 6-0. So
through most of the first half, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe it didn't look this way the whole time, but when I looked at that score, I'm like, man, they just blew them away. And so congratulations to the Houston Texans. That's their first playoff win in a long time.
Well, they won last year against the Browns. They're 6-2 all time in wild card. They have never won a divisional round, but they're 6-2 all time in the wild card. They've even had T.J. Yates one year was their quarterback because Matt Schaub had been injured and T.J. Yates won them a game.
Back when Schaub was there, Yates.
Yeah.
So anyway, they're going to make a playoff push against our good old Kansas City Chiefs. I'm just going to say, I know we're previewing later, but I really hope they continue this little win burst and win their first divisional round because I would love for the Chiefs to be out of it. Sorry, everybody who's listening who's a Chiefs fan, but that's the truth of it. But anyway, this game I didn't get to see. Looks like Houston did better than I expected. The next game, the Baltimore versus Pittsburgh. I think last time I said I think Pittsburgh is going to be a bigger trouble for them than maybe we expect because they play each other all the time. I think Baltimore might win, but it's going to be really close. Doesn't look like that was the case here. Looks like Baltimore handled them finely.
Yeah, it was a 28-14 win for the Ravens, and it wasn't even really that close. I think one of those touchdowns was late in the game, and the run game for Baltimore was just completely dominant. They rushed for over, I think, 260 some yards on the ground. And they were just plowing guys over. Like Lamar Jackson didn't have to do all that much. I think he threw the ball like 19 times maybe. And like he didn't have to like go to that level. So it's kind of nice if you're a Ravens fan, like you were able to kind of just sleepwalk your way to crushing win to a rout.
Man. But when you have him and Henry back in the backfield and nobody knows which one's going to come away with that ball when they come together, that's tough. That's a very good recipe if you can do it.
And that's something that you were saying early on in the season too, is like, how is this offense going to like maximize both of them in the same backfield? And it kind of took a little bit for them to get going, but they reached their full potential. I think it was the last touchdown of the game where it was a read option, and Lamar Jackson holds it for like longer than he typically does on a read option. So it looks like he's going to take it. And there were 3 defensive backs that all cleared from the middle of the field to Lamar Jackson's side, and Derrick Henry just like had he never has had a gap that big to run through in his NFL career. And when you get him going, like, I mean, that was just an easy touchdown for him from like 40 some yards out. So they tapped into what that full potential of that running game can look like.
Yeah. Yeah. And they look like they're going to be a very tough opponent for who do they play next week?
Well, they play the Buffalo Bills, so it'll be a fun game, I think.
And they beat the Bills.
They crushed the Bills earlier, yeah, on like week 4, week 5.
That's going to be a good matchup. Good
Yeah.
matchup. Yeah, I watched this and I just kept thinking a lot of this is going to, for Pittsburgh, it's going to be decided on what Russell Wilson can do. And he didn't look great. Um, he
Mm-mm.
didn't look great. So the question now is they're done. What in the world does the future look like for them? Because both Russell Wilson and Justin Fields are free agents now, right?
They are. Yep.
And
Um,
so there's big questions in Pittsburgh. And I would not be at all surprised if neither one of those guys are there next year and somebody else is.
Yeah, I don't think either of them are coming back, and I don't really know if you're the Steelers where you go from there. When Sam Darnold was doing really well this season, and I still didn't want the Vikings to re-sign him, I was like, I think the Steelers could be a dark horse candidate for Sam Darnold. And maybe that's still the case if Mike Tomlin forgets to watch film from the last 2 weeks of
Last
Sam
couple of
Darnold's
games.
season.
Yeah.
But other than that, like, I mean, maybe Kirk Cousins becomes available in a trade, or the Falcons just straight up release him. They're kind of too far down in a pretty weak quarterback class. They're kind of too far down in the draft rankings to get one of the top two guys there.
Right.
So they're in kind of a conundrum, and they've kind of been in that quarterback conundrum since Ben Roethlisberger left.
This is
And
always the problem when you do just well enough to either barely miss the playoffs or to get out in the first round.
yeah,
Because you just have like a pick that's not going to get you anything, like of good worth in the
yeah.
draft. And then you're like looking around for a veteran who can like stopgap you again.
Yeah, and also Najee Harris is a free agent, so he will potentially not be back unless they decide to franchise take him or something. So like the defense, it's great. Or should be. It was great for most of the year, and then kind of fell off towards the end of the season. But you have the pieces there. You need a quarterback though to make the whole team work, and we saw for a few weeks, for like a half the season, Russell Wilson was doing just that. But then he kind of reverted back into old Russell Wilson habits, and the team fell apart on offense.
Now, weren't they? They were doing really good in the beginning of the year, and then they lose like the last 4 or 5 games they
Yeah, I think
played.
I think the last 4 regular season games, and then this one makes the 5 straight losses.
Yeah,
So I
it's
mean,
crazy because they started off so dominant and then they ended so pathetic.
they were 10-3 at one point, and they ended the season, if you count the postseason within the record, 10-8. So they were at the top of, I think, fighting even perhaps for the 1 seed in a game against the Chiefs, and they ended up losing that game, and then that's kind of what started the whole collapse for Pittsburgh and Mike Tomlin there.
So that's Pittsburgh, Baltimore. Then we move to the Sunday matches.
Yeah, and the first one was an interesting one in the first half, and then kind of turned into a blowout, and that was the Buffalo Bills taking down the Denver Broncos 31-7. Broncos first drive, Bo Nix, like he on third down throws a 19-yard pass, and then he throws a deep completion on kind of that same play that we saw him get a touchdown on against Cleveland in the primetime game, on that post route over the top of the two safety defense. He got that touchdown. It was like a 43-yard touchdown. He passed for 67 yards on that first drive, and
And it looked like, oh my goodness, here it goes.
and he ended with 144 total. So he threw for about 80 yards the rest of the game, and that was despite this week in the wild card weekend, he had the most time before pressure got to him of any quarterback. He had 3.01 seconds before pressure got to him on average, and no other quarterback had nearly as much time before the pressure came to get rid of the football. So that's, and one thing Buffalo did really well was stop those screens and flare routes that Sean Payton likes to run, no matter who his quarterback is, that are kind of like extended running plays. Buffalo was waiting for those and was in the backfield on a ton of them. And that's when Bo Nix has been most successful. Those plays have been hitting. When he's been at his worst, like in the first 2 weeks of the season, that's when those plays aren't hitting. And Denver hasn't had a run game all season long. So that didn't help Bo Nix out a ton either. And then on the other end, like Josh Allen, who has been masterful in the playoffs ever since his first playoff game in 2019. He was masterful again, and the Bills ran the ball a lot early, and I think Josh Allen still was able to finish the game with 270 passing yards. And that was with, I think, James Cook getting like 16 carries before halftime.
Yeah. And I would say this, though, Denver, they showed exactly what I thought they were going to show. They had some easy games in the regular season, some that they shouldn't have won that they did, some that were just like really bad opponents, made them look a little better than they were. But I would say still, overall for the season, Denver Broncos exceeded expectations of what I thought anybody expected them to do this year. So good for you, Sean Payton, with Bo Nix. You got to the playoffs. Now you got to somehow figure out how to get a run game, how to plan for teams that know the kinds of plays you call. Yeah, switch that up some, see what they do next time. But I fully expected Buffalo to win this one. They did, and that's going to be a tough game, the next one we see them in. How about the next game?
Yeah, the next one, we shift on over to the NFC, and I guess this is the reason why Brandon didn't show up today, is 22-10 loss by the Green Bay Packers. He texted us,
guys. We'll pass it on that there was an appointment set.
Mm-hmm.
Josh Haupt, our long ago host, claims that maybe Brandon set that appointment himself, but we'll never know until he comes back on to set the record straight. But he's not here today. Philadelphia did beat Green Bay. I thought, as I watched that, it looked like they were beating them the whole game. There was never a time where I was like, oh man, looks like the Packers are going to do this.
Yeah, at least on defense. Like, they didn't really give an inch early in that game. Their offense in the first half, the Eagles offense, really struggled to move the football. Like, their first touchdown came after that fumbled kick return, where to me it looked like the Packers guy recovered it, and they reviewed it and said that he didn't. So I'm sure that's something Brandon would have said. And I, as a Vikings fan who doesn't like the Packers and wants them to lose, I agree with you, Brandon, wherever you are, that probably should have been Packers football. In any case, the Eagles get a touchdown on that drive from like 20 yards away, get a field goal, I think, on the next drive or the drive after that, and then really just kind of held Jordan Love in check. And they kind of did it more like unconventionally. Jordan Love has struggled against the blitz and this year, and has been good when teams have kind of dropped off in coverage. The Eagles only blitzed on 5% of Jordan Love's dropbacks, and just kind of put 7 guys back there and said, okay, throw it through the teeth of our defense. And he wasn't able to, which was kind of surprising to me, because usually Matt LaFleur, I feel like, is good at scheming those sort of stuff open. And that's why that Jordan Love has had so much success. But despite hardly being blitzed, I think Love was still pressured on like 35% of his dropbacks. So the Eagles were able to get pressure with just a 4-man rush. And I mean, that's a good credit to that defense. I mean, Jalen Carter, he was named an All-Pro before the game. And then you've got just like a ton of guys from that championship Georgia defense that are on the team. And like, it's basically the Georgia Eagles on defense plus Zach Bond, who had an interception and played extremely well once again, like he has all season long. That Eagles defense is tough. The offense struggled a little bit, and like Barkley wasn't able to get going.
Maybe that's something to, maybe they're onto a little something. If you have a good college defense that's dominant and you kind of help keep them together and they know each other, man, that goes a long way toward how fast you can play. When you know what your teammates are about and how they go about it and stuff. And when they're already good, it's not like you're taking a hit. What'd you think of Saquon Barkley's last grab and run?
Yeah, he could have had a much bigger game than he did. I think that was the only like explosive run that he had. But he slides down.
Smart, but everybody's like, you should have gone. I mean, they were going to win if he would have got the touchdown. It's not like Green Bay would have come back, what would
Right.
have been 30,
It would have been
29.
it would have been a
So,
3 possession game with under a minute and a half left. But yeah, he slides down.
and he
I
was
mean,
happy.
yeah, he was fine. If he's fine with it, I'm fine with it. I don't have any. I mean, there's no fantasy football anymore. I didn't have him on any fantasy football
Right.
teams, so he can do what he needs to do in that situation. It's a win-win no matter what. They weren't going to lose the game based on whatever
And
decision that
I
he
guess
made.
he doesn't run down to the 1 yard line and suddenly tweak his ACL, and everybody be like, "Oh, why didn't he just slide down?"
Yeah,
Yeah,
he just
we'll,
yeah
we'll never know. If that could
gives
have been.
himself the space to like slide down without fearing going into the end zone. But yeah, and then I like Jordan Love. I'm a little bit concerned for his future. Like he looked confused by a lot of the defense that the Eagles brought against him, and towards the back half of the season, even though he wasn't throwing interceptions a ton, like he wasn't getting a ton of those big completions. Like he has probably the fastest arm, like throws the fastest football out of anybody, and that's why he's there. But he's only a year younger than Sam Darnold, and like Sam Darnold was written off, and Jordan Love, he's got he's got the stuff, and he's shown that he's able to make it work in the regular season, especially last year. But I think the second half kind of like it was kind of a mediocre second half for him for his standards,
Mhm.
and I feel like taking the risky plays away from him because he threw like 11 interceptions in the first half of the season and then none in the second half. But he was also throwing for a ton more touchdowns, a ton more, like he was taking deeper shots, and the Packers offense was having more success. Like I'm hoping, well, as a Vikings fan, I'm hoping that what this last half of the season continues. But if I'm Brandon, I'm hoping that LaFleur doesn't like force him to go back into that sort of cautious sort of quarterback play when they come back. And I think this third year is going to be a big year. If he comes out and plays cautiously, and they don't allow him to go deep down the field a lot, or just try to stretch the field as much as he did in the first half of the season, then like there could be some issues, whether it be LaFleur or Jordan Love, for that could cause some tension, which as a Vikings fan I would hope for, but it definitely is something to look forward to heading into next year. I think he's a great quarterback. I think he's got, again, a great live arm, but I think they need to get back in sync like they were in 2022
When I look
or
at
2023.
next year, if I'm a Packers fan, I look at next year. The nice thing is that Jordan Love has been good. Maybe he's like not done his best this year. But you think, okay, if we can keep everything together, the Lions, they're going to do so well that they're going to have a lot of their coaching staff picked off, right? Offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. Are they going to be the same team without those? Maybe, maybe not. Minnesota, they're obviously moving on from Sam Darnold. Well, I say obviously, but it seems obvious to me. And then JJ
JJ McCarthy, yeah.
McCarthy is going to be the guy there. Most probably. Everybody, all the speculation is crazy, but probably he's going to be the guy there. And we don't know exactly what he's going to look like yet, how ready he's going to be. Bears, they're getting a whole everything new except for, their quarterback. I mean, they're going to have a different head coach, different GM. They have a different GM or same GM?
It's same GM,
Same
but
GM. They're keeping
Ryan Poles has kind of turned into Kevin Warren's puppet, I think, over the last couple of months, where Kevin Warren is the guy that's really in charge.
Yeah. So you got a new head coach coming there. You don't know exactly what that's going to be. So the Packers can think, well, at least we're keeping it all together. But I think recently Brandon posted in our little chat that was it New York that's requesting the interview with their DC, Jeff Hafley.
Yeah, Jeff Hafley,
for their head coach. So maybe they won't even have that full consistency coming up here. And boy, you'd hate for that defense to lessen at all. Just when it seemed like it was kind of getting where Brandon wanted it to be.
Would we hate it? I don't know.
Brandon would hate it. Packers fans would hate it. Would the rest of us hate it?
We're fine with it. Yeah. Hafley was a master at creating blitz packages or like rushing 4 men in like non-traditional manners, like not just the 4 defensive linemen, but like bringing all sorts of guys onto it without actually blitzing. So it would be heartwarming for him to leave the NFC North and move on. Yeah, we want him to succeed at the even a higher level. So like we would love for him to be a head coach. It's not
That's all
anything against the Packers. It's we want him to be promoted. You can't keep him locked up like that forever.
Don't cage this bird.
Yeah, free him. Let him go.
Oh, well, let's move on to the final Sunday game. This was Tampa Bay and Washington. This one was one that I was pretty excited to watch because I think I said last week that both of these quarterbacks have kind of proven to be the thing that pushes their team over the edge. Right at the end of the game. You got your plucky Tampa Bay quarterback there,
Baker Mayfield. Yeah. I mean, and he's like. And he had a really good game, but just wasn't able to play as much because Washington's offense just held the football for so long on their drives.
Yeah. And then Jaden Daniels, who everyone is like super excited about this year, and rightly so. Although I did hear at the end of the game people yelling MVP, MVP, and the announcer's like, "Well, not MVP, but definitely Offensive Rookie of the Year."
Yeah.
It's true, but Jaden Daniels and I think it was our resident Commanders fan posting the, how many games with 0 punts and no turnovers. Jaden Daniels has 3, and then Patrick Mahomes, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, and somebody else combined have 2 or something. And he's like, there it is.
Yeah.
Goat. And I'm like, well, maybe the GOAT. He definitely has potential, and he had a team around him, and he does at the end of games do what he needs to do to get them to win. So it was an exciting game, I thought.
Yeah, I mean the last long drive by Washington was just like textbook. They got the ball with like 4.5 minutes left. They're able to just go methodically down the field, and then on that 3rd and 2 play, Jaden Daniels, like with his speed, just is able to get around the corner and somehow evades Kalijah Cansey to get the first down so that they can run the clock down all the way to 0 before kicking a field goal that was a little bit precarious. It goes off of the upright,
doink, right?
But it was a
just
good doink.
That, this was like they were on their second or third down, second down, I think. But they'd only left like 3 seconds left on the clock. And the announcer's like, yeah, usually, they might leave a little extra time in case there's a mess up on the, getting the ball set or the kick or something. They have another shot at it.
Yeah.
But they left 3 seconds, and if it didn't go, it was done. Well, it was going to overtime.
Right.
But when that hit the upright, I'm like, oh my goodness, they just missed, but it went in.
Yeah.
So exciting times for Washington Commanders fans.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the quarterbacks that they've had in the playoffs, like in this like losing streak since 2000, I think this was their first one since the 2005-06 NFL season, so 06 playoffs. Like it's been Todd Collins, Taylor Heineke, Robert Griffin III, who got injured, and then Kirk Cousins in that same game, and then later they haven't had like some sort of consistency at the quarterback position when they've had these playoff runs, and that's why they've been losing so much. And I think even like it was perhaps Jason Campbell when they won their last playoff game, and I believe that was like a game where they had under 200 yards of total offense, and their defense just made some plays all the way back in the day. But the Jaden Daniels, like he is the future for this team. Like you can hang your hat on that if you're a Commanders fan. That they did have some issues on defense, which is why I think they needed to control the clock so much. They rarely stopped Tampa Bay, and the 2 times that they got like turnovers or the stops when they needed to were kind of these unforced errors that Tampa Bay made with that botched handoff from Baker Mayfield on the end around that ended up Washington getting the football back. And then on a 3rd down and short, the center snapping the football before anybody else knew what was going on. And then Baker Mayfield having to take the sack so that they couldn't go for it on fourth down if they didn't pick up the third down, and force them to go for a field goal instead of keeping the ball, keeping the clock going, and potentially going for a touchdown to take the lead and not giving the Commanders any time back. So moving forward, I think that is going to be something that it'll be interesting to watch for Washington, especially against the best offense in the NFL next week. But the defense didn't really get it done, and but Jaden Daniels was able to overcome all of that and just put on a special performance.
Yeah, and so right now, well, let's look back a year ago. Bryce Young went number 1. C.J. Stroud went number 2. In your mind right now, C.J. Stroud is the better quarterback, right? Caleb Williams has to be thinking about man, I've got to come back next year and show people that I am in this still too. Because right now, you go one more year like this year and Jaden Daniels playing as he is and Caleb Williams playing as he is, and it's going to be that same situation in the public's mind. It's going to be like, oh, it was obvious that second pick was the better pick. That's not necessarily so. This is not a C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young necessarily. Could have been organizational, could have been system. Maybe Bryce Young is better than we think, but that is definitely a thing that happens. Is people's mind kind of get set, and right now, I bet most people you would ask, is Bryce Young a good quarterback? Most people are going to say, no, that was a mistake. He's too small. Whatever. So Caleb Williams right now is looking at Jaden Daniels' success and probably thinking, man, I need to make sure that this is not the onus put on me after next year, so that I become that kind of butt of the joke.
I will say I do think if the last half of the season is going to be a trend, that Bryce Young is better right now than CJ Stroud. And then I'm gonna duck into a cave afterwards.
When those two were drafted, I thought CJ Stroud was being put in the worst position because their team really had nothing on it that you would be like, that's something. I mean, the Texans at that time, you didn't have a Nico Collins. You didn't have the Tank Dell. You didn't have, Will Anderson. I mean, it looked like, what is that team? That team's horrible. But they had DeMeco Ryans come in. They had C.J. Stroud. They got Will Anderson. They did end up with those two receivers that we didn't know anything about. And that team looks a lot better now. But you look at Carolina, did he go into a good situation? Absolutely not. They had Frank Reich, and I'm a guy who loves Frank Reich as a person, but I just don't think he was a great coach. And I think that, along with the fact that they traded away Christian McCaffrey, they didn't really get any pieces for him anywhere else on that field. He went into a rough situation, and it showed. And if they could get some pieces, maybe he could begin to look like what he is. But let's hope for Bryce Young's longevity that they get more pieces and he ends up looking more like a number 1 overall pick.
Yeah. He had a strong finish to the season, and I want to see that continue for him. But let's move on to. I guess there was one more game there.
There was. I guess let's talk about this last one that happened on Monday night.
I feel like I've never known what the thought process for Peter was when he was denying Jesus 3 times during his crucifixion, but I feel like I know it now. I'm denying the Minnesota Viking.
You're going to.
I know nothing about this team. I've been a Bills fan the whole time. I love Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. That's how it felt. I did get to go to this game. It was a 27-9 loss, by the way. Rams beat the Vikings 27-9. I brought my 3 oldest kids with me to the game. I was on the way out. I was called the bravest man somebody has ever met because I was there were 3 rascals with me. So I pat myself in the back there. But
I just think how good of a dad you would have been if they had won and you got to say, I took my kids when the Minnesota Vikings beat, with their 14-2 record, they went in and beat the Los Angeles Rams and went on to win the Super Bowl.
Yeah. It
could have been the story.
That it could have been. Unfortunately, the loudest we cheered I guess outside of the defensive touchdown that was overturned early in the game, the loudest we cheered was when the crowd noise forced Matt Stafford to take a timeout on the first drive of the game, because it was like, oh man, we it's a home
We're
game
in
for
it.
us Vikings fan, and
Yeah.
it really was. There was a ton more purple. Well, so I was above the Rams bench, so I couldn't see what that side of the stadium looked like. But from where I could see, there was a ton of purple, and there was the skull chant going on. Um, but it turned into a Rams game like by halftime, because all the Vikings fans were quiet, and a lot of them started to leave. I have never, like, even in games where the Vikings have been blown out in the playoffs, like 38-7 against the Philadelphia Eagles, like there were moments to cheer there, because the first drive, the Vikings went down the field and scored a touchdown, and then they got a stop, and then we're moving the football well until finally Case Keenum threw a pick six and everything. There were moments to cheer in that game early on. There was nothing really to cheer for in this game for the Minnesota Vikings, and that's a big credit to what the Rams defense was able to do to Sam Darnold, and that was getting pressure on him. 52% of his 50 dropbacks, they were getting pressure on him, and they did that while mostly only rushing 4. And it was kind of using that sort of simulated pressure that we talked about earlier, where you stack the defensive line on one side so that the offensive line slides that way. Oh, but then you have a blitzing cornerback from the other side that the left tackle can't move his feet quick enough to get a good angle on him, and then Sam Darnold ends up fumbling the football. They only blitzed 18% of the time against Minnesota,
Wow.
and we're still able to get the highest pressure of any team in the first week of the playoffs. And it was like a complete fallback. Like Sam Darnold reverted completely to who he had been with the New York Jets and with the Carolina Panthers. It was this guy that whenever pressure comes, he doesn't know where to step up in the pocket. And it just, like, he was operating at such a good elite level despite facing similar sorts of pressure, like moving around the pocket, like earlier in the season, especially after that Jacksonville Jaguars game, through that like 7-week stretch. He was operating at a level of quarterback play that I really hadn't seen a Vikings quarterback operate at since like Brett Favre in 2009. And I thought that he had really taken this huge step forward. And we joked about the ghosts had
Mm-hmm.
now reverted back to, they're on his side now, and they're telling him where to go with the football. But now they have played the cruelest trick on him of all time, and they have forced him back into being a they did that on purpose to set him up for this complete and total failure. Or it's like an Angels in the outfield situation where Joseph Gordon-Levitt prays for the Angels to win the pennant so that he can be back with his dad. Sam Darnold prays to the Angels, but guess what? The Angels, they don't play in the playoffs. They respect those rules of the game. They don't respect the other the other games. So that was the other situation. That my only other explanation for why Sam Darnold played as poorly as he did against the pressure. And like we can kind of point back to, the Lions kind of gave them the playbook. And a lot of that there was a lot of inside rushes, but I think it was actually the Cardinals that gave both of those teams the playbook of how to stop Sam Darnold.
Mm-hmm.
Because they were doing a lot of that same sort of thing in a game against him earlier in the season, and they were getting pressure. He was pressured more in that Cardinals game than he was against the Rams. That was the game that he faced the most pressure in all season. And like it was 19-6 at one point, and it looked like the Cardinals were just absolutely dominating. But the Cardinals didn't have the players to sustain that, while the Rams did. They were able to keep the pressure in his face, despite the fact that Sam Darnold had the second most time before. We talked about Bo Nix, his time before pressure got to him. Sam Darnold had the second most time before the pressure got to him. So he was creating also a lot of these pressures on his own, which was a little bit discouraging. He was holding onto the ball for so long.
And that
And
was the thing I noticed most when I was watching. I'm like, my goodness, he's holding that so long. Even a non-quarterback, I can feel you need to get rid of that. And he would just hold it and kind of run around and try a different route, and and he'd go back and back, and then he'd get sacked. And it's just like, you've got to throw that away if you know this is like not developing throw it away.
Yeah.
And
And there were routes open. I remember, I mean, granted, I'm way up high and can see every single receiver, but I'm saying like CJ, go to CJ Ham. At like 3 times I'm saying that, and he's still holding onto the ball after I've said that. And like that was multiple times. Now the Vikings didn't have any like hot routes against unblitzed players, which was interesting. Like I feel like you need to add those in, like between like,
yes,
and that's the receiver and the quarterback being on the same page. There was one time, I mean, that's not just Sam Darnold or Kevin O'Connell's fault. Those things are built into every play. If Justin Jefferson sees that his cornerback is blitzing and he has a vertical route, he just needs to stem it off and run a 5-yard hitch route to get the ball and make himself open so Sam Darnold can get the ball to him quickly. And Jefferson didn't do that. I don't know if Sam Darnold would have thrown it there if he did on a lot of those plays, but yeah, the pressure affected him. He made some bad throws. He had one bad throw to Jalen Naylor over the middle where it was just complete. Like he stepped up in the pocket. He did what he had done for most of the season, and like it looked like, oh, he's going to deliver a good football to Naylor, and it was a good 3 yards behind him, and it was just inaccurate.
that was the second thing I noticed. When he did throw the ball, it was not on target. It was like high a lot. It was over. It was just, you're just like, I felt like he was totally overwhelmed and just trying his best to get that football out to somebody, and it wasn't working. And yeah, I couldn't decide when I was watching TV at first if this was just the Rams were being so good on defense, or if he was just, if his mind totally like did a blank. It's just like he seemed to not have the control that he had earlier in the year. And so now your question comes, what is the future? You're going to keep O'Connell. You have JJ.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is you're hoping JJ starts and is Jaden Daniels-esque in the way he plays the game next year. But there's so many people in the commentators booth and pundits on the web questioning who's going to be your starter. Is it McCarthy? Are they going to start someone else and let him come in? I feel like it has to be McCarthy. I'm not a fan, but I just feel like not that I'm not a fan of Minnesota at all, but I'm a Colts fan. I'm not a Minnesota fan, but I feel like you got to, now this is a Colts fan who's saying the same thing about AR. You got to get him in there and get him reps and get him started. That's my feeling. What's your feeling?
Yeah, I think you obviously move on from Darnold now. You don't even try to do the whole franchise tag and trade, which was what I kind of wanted to do because I don't know if he'll get as much value in a tag and trade sort of situation, and then you're on the hook for his contract. Yeah, I think JJ McCarthy should start day one as long as he's healthy. We have tape of one of his preseason games, and that's it outside of his Michigan film. And he looked really good in that game, but it was a preseason game against a vanilla defense. Like you're not running all of your schemes on defense. You're just running kind of simple coverage base structures. He looked good in that time, but we'll have to wait to see what it looks like against a good defense. We don't really know what he has, but what I do know is that the last time there was a national champion winning quarterback from Michigan playing in his second season in the NFL, that quarterback went on to win 7 Super Bowls. So if we're going to go back on history, JJ McCarthy is about to be the greatest of all time. But obviously that's the simple thing to do for McCarthy. He's got the weapons on offense, except for the interior offensive line, which struggled a lot. Christian Darrisaw will be back from his injury. He's a really good left tackle. Brian O'Neill has been a solid right tackle throughout his career. Those guys can bookend things on the offensive line for Minnesota, but I don't think you can bring back either of the 2 guards or the center Garrett Bradbury if you want to put JJ McCarthy in the best position to find success for next season. Like those inside guys, not only were they bad against pressure, but every time the Vikings do a run play, those guys are, and most of the time it's like an inside zone. They're just not in sync. They're not moving in step with one another like you see with the Detroit Lions, where again, it's like Swan Lake out there because they know exactly where they need to be to move people out of the way every single time. Even when it's not a successful run, the Lions the offensive line is working as one, and it's like a mosh pit for the Minnesota Vikings where they're just trying to throw guy, but they're throwing their guy into their own teammate, and then that causes a play to get into the backfield. So the run game, O'Connell has very little confidence in calling run plays because of the interior of that offensive line. Most of the time, those plays are 3 to 4 yards, and even the bigger, more explosive ones are 10, 15 yards because interior guys, after the double team on the inside zone, they're not getting to the second level to block the linebackers. So there's still guys that Aaron Jones, who's a little bit older, has to make miss. Jones is a free agent. I would like him perhaps back at the right price. But I think the Vikings in free agency, especially really need to, they have $77 million in cap space. So they need to prioritize on replacing their 3 starting cornerbacks because they're all free agents, and then getting some good guard and center play. They'll have the 24th pick in the draft, and then they have 2 other draft picks right now, and they'll probably get 1 compensatory draft pick from Kirk Cousins signing with Atlanta last year, and then perhaps 1 more. It just depends on what the NFL decides for that. So we might have 2 third-round picks, probably 1 for sure, but otherwise it's a barren draft cabinet as of right now. Before the compensatory picks are in play, it's just 3 draft picks for the Minnesota Vikings with some holes to be filled. It's a good thing they have this cap space because now they're going to be able to fill those holes in free agency, which is where our general manager, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, has found most of his success. It hasn't really been in the draft a ton so far in his 3 years, but he has found a lot of success in picking the right guys, the right free agents.
Just the opposite of Chris Ballard, who does well in the draft, does nothing in free agency. Maybe it'll be different this year because he knows his seat is burning hot.
Yeah.
We'll see. Well, let's go ahead and look toward the games coming up. Make a few predictions on what we think will be, and that is divisional round football. What do we got here?
Well, the first game will be the Houston Texans and the Kansas City Chiefs. That'll be Saturday, and that is at Kansas City. These 2 teams played earlier in the season, and Kansas City won that game. I believe it wasn't the Black Friday game, but I think it was one of the Christmas games or one of the Saturday games before Christmas. In any case, there is a path where the Houston Texans win this game. Like it includes Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter being as good as they were last week, which they could be against the Chiefs offensive line because their strength is the middle of the offensive line, not the outside. So, but even then, like the Texans were able to beat Los Angeles because they were able to get it done on the ground. Kansas City has really good run defense, and that's going to make things harder for CJ Stroud. And I think Kansas City breaks through. I think it's going to be a low scoring game, whatever the the over under on it is. I think I would go towards the under, but I think the Houston defense will be able to keep Mahomes and Pacheco and all those guys in check for a lot of the game. But I think eventually in clutch time, Mahomes is able to put together another good drive. It's at 8.5 point favorites for the Chiefs right now. I would based on that, I would perhaps pick the Texans, but not to win, but to at least cover that. But I don't think they're going to go on to the AFC Championship game, and I think they're the only team in the NFL that has not been to conference championship.
So you have a difference between Kansas City and the Chargers is Patrick Mahomes and his ability to just go anywhere and throw from any platform to any place on the field in such weird, awkward ways sometimes and get it where he wants to. That's what's going to make it really hard for, I think, that pass rush. Even if they play as well against the line, you still have Patrick Mahomes, which is different than Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert's a good quarterback. He can throw it really far, but he doesn't have that same squirreliness of being able to get out of situations. You also have Kansas City has the mentality of we've been here before and we'll be here again and we're going to make it. They just have this belief that they're going on. In all reality, Kansas City's probably going to win, but I'm going to make a bold prediction that Houston wins this game.
Oh yeah.
I'm making that this time so that we can see. I think it is one of those things that the way Kansas City's been playing this year, they have won so many games by less than a touchdown. So many. And Houston is the kind of team that has not been great all year, but they sometimes can put it all together. And I think This might be the week we see that Houston goes on and everybody gets crazy and the media starts talking about like, well, Houston picked off the Super Bowl winner from the last, couple of years and they're the new, and then next week, I think the Houston Texans get beat by whoever comes out from Buffalo, Baltimore. Um, so I think it's a short-lived glory for the Houston Texans, but I'm going to say Houston Texans beat Kansas City. I understand that everything is stacked against that prediction as far as the way Kansas City's mentality is. But I also know that D'Amico Ryans and C.J. Stroud and their defense and Tank Dell and Nico Collins, they can all put together what they need to win this game. And I'm going to predict this is any given Sunday. Houston Texans beat Kansas City.
Wow, that it would be nice. I'm kind of cheering for the Chiefs for this game only because I want the narrative of either Bills Chiefs or Ravens Chiefs next week in the AFC.
Well,
and the build up to that.
The biggest game would be Buffalo Kansas City because
Yeah,
they've been there and it was like brutal.
Yeah.
In both of those games. And so that would be the biggest buildup you could have for sure.
Going on to the next game, it is the Washington Commanders and the Detroit Lions. So the Lions at 15-2, the Commanders coming off that win against Tampa Bay. What do you think about this one?
I would like to start this by apologizing to Josh Haupt. Love you, Josh Haupt. Love the Commanders. Love Jaden Daniels, Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think he is plucky. I think he can keep his team alive and come back. But I think Detroit is another beast. I think Detroit is this driven machine that's like a plow that will just, it's not like it's going to get to the end of the game and be like within 3-4 points. I think Detroit's going to come in and start busting kneecaps. And I said busting instead of biting, but same thing. I think Detroit's just they've had so many stinking injuries and every time they step up, everybody has gotten very versatile in their team. And I think they steamroll. I think they steamroll the Commanders here. And I think Jaden Daniels does a couple great things. And you're like, yeah, but I just don't think it's enough team-wise. I think Detroit, it's like you said, Detroit's offense and their defense just seem to move together so in sync. So you called it like Swan Lake. It's all moving like it's supposed to. Everybody knows where they're supposed to be. And I feel that's crazy thinking about the injuries they've had. I wonder, what was Aiden Hutchinson? He said he could be back for the Super Bowl. He keeps not ruling it out. I don't know if that's actually true or not, or if that's just wishful thinking for him. But even in his absence, their defense has been strong, especially the last couple weeks. Their defense has been strong, and especially the last game against the Vikings. They looked really. So I love Washington. The truth is, when I was looking at the Colts being out, the two teams I've been rooting for are Detroit and Washington. I knew that wouldn't last because they're both NFC. But I'm going Detroit on this. I've been rooting for Detroit for a long time. They've never been to the Super Bowl, ever. I really would love to see that happen.
The last time these two teams met in the playoffs, it was the NFC Championship game in 1992, and Washington blew them out with 51 points. I think the Detroit Lions probably get their revenge in this one and kind of flip the script. But if Washington wants to stay in this game, their defense is going to need to make some stops, which they didn't really do a whole lot against Tampa Bay. The way that you can try to make stops, or at least give yourself the best chance, is kind of to just sell out against the run, load the box. Even though a lot of times Detroit has 3 wide receivers when they run the ball instead of the 2 tight ends or 3 tight end sets. So you have to be wary with your personnel about who's going to cover who. If you are down a cornerback, if you're just playing your base defense, put 8 guys in the box. Detroit's has not had as much success against 8-man fronts. They're about league average. It's not bad, but it's not good. So you're at least containing it. Hopefully you'd think a little bit if you're Washington. And you're going to need guys like Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu to make some good plays. The other thing is just play man defense the whole game to give yourself the best shot, because Ben Johnson is a master at scheming those zones open. He knows the coverage rules of the big hot defense of match coverage. He knows where the cornerbacks are supposed to be if they see a wide receiver going deep, so that he'll put something underneath it. Or if the wide receiver goes short, someone else is driving on the football, and he can get the. That's the zone coverage. So he knows how to break those zone rules and break defenses with that. If they play man, yes, there are man beaters that Detroit can run, but I think you're still going to give yourself a better shot to stop Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamison Williams. So play a cover 2, cover 1 man, and load the box with 8. Otherwise, I think Detroit just runs away with it. I think Washington will have some moments on offense, but I think Detroit ends up winning this game pretty handily, unfortunately. Yeah, Josh Hop's hitmen, they did not get the check deposit from last week, so that's why we're able to do this safely without the fear for our lives.
Right. I'm in a bulletproof room with a lock on the door, so just being careful. We do love the Washington Commanders. We do love the story. I think Jaden Daniels goes on to be a great quarterback, and I think that team is on the rise. So we're not saying Washington's no good and we hate Washington. But right now, this is Dan Campbell's time. This is Jared Goff's time. This is the Detroit Lions, the city of Detroit's time. I'm pushing for him to go all the way myself.
Yeah, no, I want them to lose. No anti-NFC nor any team but I'm cheering wholeheartedly for Washington. But yeah, I think Detroit is going to put it on them.
Let's go on to L.A. and Philadelphia on Sunday at the 2 p.m. Central Time. I guess I should probably talk in Eastern Time, but I'm Central, so 2 p.m. Central Time. What do you think's going on here? I have my thoughts. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the Rams have a chance in this one, despite when they played earlier this season, it was a 37-20 Eagles win. The problem is that, yes, the Rams did face pressure against the Vikings, but it was because the Vikings were blitzing on nearly 70% of Matt Stafford's dropbacks. The Eagles do not blitz hardly ever. They're one of the lowest blitzing teams in the league, and yet they're still one of the teams that creates pressure at a high rate. So if the Eagles can do that, they can rush those 4 guys. They can drop those 7 men back in coverage. And even though Brian Flores' coverage system is co-opted from Vic Fangio's, where it's like this Palms quarter sort of defense, and that's where the coverage rules can get broken the most. And Matt Stafford was able to break those coverage rules. The Eagles just do it better. They have Zach Bond, who's a better linebacker than pretty much anybody. They have Cooper DeJean, who's the best nickel corner perhaps in the league, and then Kenyon Mitchell. He spent his whole college career playing in that system. So even though he's a rookie, he's not going to get confused when Los Angeles motions his guy to a certain side of the field, or if they overload one side of the field, he's going to know exactly where he needs to be in his match zone. But the Rams were able to manipulate that same sort of match zone against the Vikings last week and have some success on offense against it. So maybe they are able to do that again. And I think that's how they win the game is if they continue with those motions and just confuse the Eagles on defense. Because I don't trust the Eagles offense to get a whole lot done outside of Saquon Barkley. I think it's another game that's going to be a low scoring game that the Rams are going to play tight. And it all comes down to if they can stop Saquon Barkley. They weren't able to last time. We'll see if that scheme changes, but I mean, their defense has been lights out kind of these last 4 to 5 weeks of the season. Ever since that Bills game where they won the game but gave up 42 points, like Jared Verse and Braden Fisk, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the show, those guys were at Florida State and had the best defense in the NCAA the year they were at Florida State. The Rams bring both of them in, and they've both had otherworldly success in the front 7. That front 7 is good for the Rams, so they can stop Saquon Barkley. But if Barkley gets going, I think it's going to be like a 20-10 sort of game for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Here's the thing. I think they can stop Saquon for a bit. What's going to be the difference is Sam Darnold was holding that ball too long, looking lost, throwing it crazy when he did throw it, getting sacked, losing yards a lot. And so then they had to, it was an obvious, this has to be a pass. Let that defense look even more fierce than it was. The difference is I think Jalen Hurts will throw those away. instead of like holding the ball too long and scattering around and then running back and losing 10 yards, having second and 37 or whatever it was. I
Yeah.
felt like you guys had so much. I don't feel like they'll put themselves in those situations because I think Jalen Hurts will just throw it away. And then that'll give them a chance to still have a short yardage where Saquon Barkley can eventually begin to wear them down and run through. And I do think it's been fun watching Matthew Stafford. I mean, he just looked alive and young again in this last game.
He did.
And I think, he's going to be out there doing what he can. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, right? Yeah. Those, they're tough receivers. They can take a ball, catch it in a small space and take a hit and sometimes even get yards after that. That's good. But I think the difference is going to be Sam Darnold and Jalen Hurts, that hold it versus throw it mentality. I think that's what's going to keep them close enough to the line that they can eventually, because it's not like he doesn't have people he can pass to. So maybe he'll get off a few of those. But I think Saquon Barkley is going to have short enough yardage that he can make more of a difference than what Minnesota was able to do when they're in 3rd and 27 and whatever. So I'm going with Philadelphia winning this one. I do think it's going to be a high level of energy from the Rams, but I think Philadelphia is still going to come out on top.
Yeah, and to further that point, I think also Jalen Hurts has more confidence to throw to AJ Brown and Devontae Smith in tight windows that aren't necessarily open, and has more of an anticipation than Sam Darnold did in that game against the Rams. So I think that I think we both are on board with the Eagles winning this game. Although I can see the Rams
causing an upset.
Like they have a 40% chance, I think, in my mind, to win this game.
It'll be a fun one. That's the beauty of when you get to this time of playoffs. They're all fun ones. They're all like, oh my goodness, both these teams are good. What's going to happen? So let's move on to the last one. Baltimore and Buffalo on Sunday night.
This might
5:30.
It's like, it's that like kind of weird window, but it's a perfect window, I feel like, for this game. This is going to be like perhaps an even better game than whatever the Super Bowl ends up being. This might be the best game of the year. We've had that happen in the division round a lot over the last couple of years, especially that Chiefs-Bills overtime game from a few years back. This Baltimore-Buffalo game is between two teams that are just very, very similar in terms of how they play defense and like how they play offense. Like they're both teams that can play in structure and out of structure.
Both Baltimore quarterbacks can run like crazy.
And both running backs have been good. I mean, Derrick Henry is obviously a step above James Cook, but James Cook has been electric this year as well. So like it's going to be like tough for both of these defenses to stop both of these offenses. Both of these defenses have had points in the season where it looked like they were a sieve, where everyone's just doing whatever they want against them, and it's been up to the offense to get them back into the games. They've also had moments where they've looked really, really good, and the Bills are healthy on defense. They haven't been healthy through much of the season, and they were able to hold a Broncos offense that had been decent heading into the postseason. They were able to hold them to 7 points and really kind of shut down what Bo Nix and Sean Payton wanted to do. And that was something that really no other team had been able to do. They weren't able to stop those screens and those kind of misdirection routes that Denver had done. Buffalo watched film and was able to get it done. The problem is that the Ravens offensive line is just so big. Even though the Broncos have better numbers like against on their offensive line against the pass rush so far this season, like Buffalo's just undersized against when it comes to going up against what this Baltimore defensive line or offensive line rather can do. And I also think the Ravens do a better job stopping the run than the Bills. And like with Michael Pierce in the middle, he's just got the big body that can kind of force 2 or 3 interior offensive linemen to have to block him, or else he's able to just reach an arm out like Mr. Fantastic and bring down a running back, whether it be James Cook or Ty Johnson. So I'm going to lean towards the Ravens in this game because of that, but I think it's going to be, I'm hoping it's not like what it was in week 4, which was, I think, 35-10. I want like this game to live up to the billing. You know, some of these games you get where the buildup is coming from all week, and then one of the teams just like had a better game plan and it was 30-5 or whatever, 30-3. I'm hoping we don't have that. I'm hoping that it's just like this super competitive 35-31 sort of game, 28-24, where it's a last second touchdown, and it kind of is reminiscent of that Chiefs-Bills divisional game from a few years ago.
All the other games, this may say more about me than about the games, but like all of the other 3 games, I felt more confident saying, I think this team will win. I think this team will win. When we come to this last game, and again, this may say more about me, I don't have a strong confidence. I don't know. It's so up in the air for me which of these teams could show strong and which could just look like, what in the world are we looking at? You were so strong all year, and now you look like this. If I had to go off of just like a quick gut check, I almost feel like Baltimore is going to come into this one more physical, more ready. And I hate that because Buffalo, I've been wanting Buffalo to win for so long. Josh Allen has been so good. And yes, people are starting to talk about when does their window start to close. I don't know that it's closing yet, but it's definitely been a long time that they've been kind of hovering around these like these divisional and championship. What's next week?
The conference,
the conference champion. So they've been hovering around that spot for so long that it's hard to maintain that. It's hard to maintain hovering in that spot without either going all the way or starting to fall off at some point. So my heart would want Buffalo to win this, and my heart does want Buffalo to win this, no doubt. But my gut is saying, man, Baltimore's going to come in ready to punch them in the face. And so I do think this is going to be an amazing game. Heart-wise, I'm going to hope for Buffalo. Gut-wise, I think Baltimore is going to win this year. And like I already said, I think Houston's going to win. And so that's going to think of how the AFC Championship game is going to look so different if Kansas City and Buffalo are not part of it in any way.
Yeah, if it's like Baltimore and Houston, it doesn't have the same sort of like weekly build-up.
It feels like Baltimore's going to pound them and go on to the Super Bowl, which I don't want. So I am hoping for my heart here. I hope Buffalo wins. I want Buffalo to win. I want Buffalo to be in that game and beat Houston and go on to the Super Bowl against the Lions. That's my choice. I'm saying it right now. I want it to be Lions-Buffalo in the great Super Bowl because then when we get to that point, neither one. Well, has Buffalo ever won? It's been there 4 times. They've never won, have they?
No, Buffalo hasn't won. Houston hasn't won. Detroit hasn't won. So in that situation where if all 3 of them are in the championship game next weekend, you have one team that for sure will be in that hasn't won a Super Bowl, and then perhaps both teams playing for their first Super Bowl.
That would be such an ideal, fun Super Bowl to watch. Again, I want it to be Detroit-Buffalo, but if it was Detroit-Houston, I would still be like, this is awesome. This is cool. Even though Houston's AFC South and I hate them, they have never won a Super Bowl. And I'd be like pretty excited for their fan bases, no matter who won. But boy, I really want that to be Detroit this year. So I'm laying all my cards out on the table here. When the Colts went out, I became an honorary Detroit Lions fan for the rest of this season. Fandom aside, though, they're a good team. And I hope Buffalo makes it. Going to put it there.
Yeah, I am going to live vicariously through Buffalo because their history is probably the team. They have a team with a similar history, more so than any other, as the Minnesota Vikings, with the 4 Super Bowl losses and all the heartbreaks, all the missed field goals.
Yeah.
So
and then
I'm going to live vicariously through them.
Through Kansas City in those 13 seconds. Was it last year or 2 years ago?
That was 2022 calendar year, but the 2021 season.
So fresh in my memory.
Yeah, that was a great game.
Oh,
but
man.
Hopefully this one lives up to that billing.
I hope so. Well, guys, we'll be back next week to break down 2 games or 4 games to review those and then kind of look forward to what we've got to see coming. So join us then. Thanks for showing up here on the Football Fandemic with us. If you have anything that you think is different, let us know. Otherwise, we'll see you guys next time.